Howdy, folks. This video is about semicolons, probably my favorite and most useless punctuation mark that we're going to learn about. So, again, make sure that you're taking notes, jotting down some ideas, because we're going to start connecting. This connects back to a couple of previous lessons that we've learned before. So make sure you're maybe even reviewing your notes before we move on. Before we talk about the semicolon, we need to talk about our puny friend, the comma splice. And comma splices like this one are just not strong enough to hold two independent clauses together. So in this sentence, which is really two independent clauses, I'm trying to hold it together with just a comma. So there's two ways that we've learned how to fix this problem so far. Number one, just change that comma to a period. Number two, add a coordinating conjunction, one of those fanbys like so or and. Or we can have that puny little comma hit the whites, grow a little bicep here, and put a little dot on top of it. That's what I think about the dot on top of the comma is. It's a little comma bicep. So it's nice and strong now. So what the semicolon is just basically it's another way to connect two independent clauses, right? So you're never really going to need to connect this, but I want you to know what it does. So the rule for semicolons, like you have to get this through your mind. If you're going to use a semicolon, you need to check, is there a full sentence on this side? Is there a full sentence on this side? And are these ideas basically connected and equal, right? So that's the rule. If you're going to use a semicolon, independent clauses need to go on both sides. And so you might ask, like, why? Why would I ever use a semicolon? Well, technically, you'll never need to use a semicolon grammatically, but it is stylistic, right? Because if I put a period in between two ideas, I'm basically implying that those two sentences are separate. They're different ideas. But sometimes I have a thought that's a full idea and an independent clause, and another thought that's also another independent clause. But I want to show that these two are like inextricably connected. Like these two things have to be read together. And that's when we're going to use that semicolon, where it's kind of like a continuation of the idea where you could end a sentence here, but if you really want the reader to continue on and read this as one full fluid thought, even though grammatically you would need to split it up into two sentences, that's where the semicolon comes into play. So it's a great thing to show off in your like other classes to be like, hey, I paid attention to English class. Look at this semicolon. These two ideas are connected. A lot of times we're going to see them when we use transition words in our sentences. Not always, but oftentimes these can be indicators. I'll refer to these transition words as THAMOs sometimes because that's an acronym for some of the more common transition words like therefore, however, also, moreover, or otherwise. But do keep in mind that transition words are not conjunctions. So if I have a sentence like this, we always go to the mountains in the fall. However, this year we went to the spring. I see a lot of students try to have that word, however, act like a coordinating conjunction. So I'm just going to throw a comma and a coordinating conjunction in here, and I'm good, right? Well, no, you're not. That's incorrect because transition words are not coordinating conjunctions. They're actually, they perform a different linguistic or grammatical function of connecting ideas. So I would need to use that semicolon, and then this, however, basically is acting like a introduction to my second independent clause, right? So it gets a little bit more complicated with punctuation, but just pay attention is what I'm saying when you see some of these transition words. And notice that the transition words doesn't always have to come at the beginning of your next independent clause. See how I moved the however to the end of the sentence here, or even in the middle of the sentence here as an interruptive, non-essential word or clause, however you want to remember those. All of these work, and all of these are implying that there's like some link between these ideas. And in this case, it's kind of a contradiction because we're using that word however. But they're all implying that, hey, I've got two independent clauses that I need to connect somehow with that semicolon. Okay, so just as a quick review, because I throw out a lot of vocabulary, you can just press pause on the screen and kind of just make sure, double check yourself. Do I know what coordinated conjunctions are? Do I know what subordinated conjunctions or SWABIes are? And now I've got these other ones that are called transition words or conjunctive adverbs. Like, oh, isn't that a gross word? No, you don't need to memorize that. You need to know them as transition words, or THAMOs is just fine. But I need you to be able to identify those types of words so you can punctuate them correctly. All right. So last piece on semicolons is I do want to emphasize that they are different than colons. So remember, colons clarify ideas. They introduce lists, right? They can add emphasis to a sentence. And sometimes you can use a colon when there's two sentences on either side of that colon, so long as that second sentence is actually clarifying that first sentence. Versus a semicolon where I'm just taking kind of two separate ideas and I am implying that they are connected and equal somehow. So I've got two examples there of like, here's what a semicolon does, here's what a semicolon does. They are different. And so we're going to practice some of those differences in these sentences. All right, here are two sentences. I'll get my face out of the way. Again, do it for John Cena. See if you can fix these sentences. Sometimes they might need a colon, a comma, or a semicolon. Let's see what you can find out. All right, did you get it done? Let's see how we did. So the first one, since I used that word but, that's a coordinating conjunction, a fanboy, so we don't need a semicolon here. Just a simple comma will do, because I've got independent clause and then an independent clause. The rest of the lawn, unfortunately, was dying. I tried to throw you off because I put one of those interrupting words in there, but since I've already used that coordinating conjunction, a semicolon would be overkill. And then for this one, the house was clean, the table set, the porch light on, semicolon, everything was ready for the guest's arrival. Now, some students might make an argument that couldn't a colon work here too, because I'm kind of clarifying why why all these things were done. You can kind of make an argument for that. I would say it would make a whole lot more sense if this was switched. Like if we started this second sentence with everything was ready for the guest's arrival, then use that colon to introduce that list to clarify what everything was that was ready. But since I'm starting with that list, the house was clean, the table was set, and the porch light was on, I'm just kind of connecting that this idea that everything was ready for the guest's arrival. I don't think that's a clarification of the porch light being on. I think that's a continuation and a connection of these ideas. So minor things, some good grammatical quandaries for you to think about. It's not as difficult as this all the time, I promise. Cool. Holler with questions. Good luck, folks.